I don't know the specifics of it and whether or not some of them do not deserve to be put into this category, but you are looking at politicians, British politicians of colour who don't challenge that that paradigm of quiet racism. The idea that the response to a crime committed by a black person is different to the response to a crime committed by a white person. You can't acknowledge that if you are simultaneously claiming that there's no such thing as systemic racism, which I think they all signed up to that Sewell report. But all of them must have done because of their roles in the Conservative Party at the time. Not one of them stood up and said, this is absolute hogwash. How can I possibly put my name to this? How can my party possibly contemplate putting something into the public space that denies something as obvious as the fact that the three lads who missed penalties in the Euros final received a species of abuse that they wouldn't have received if they were white?
And that's something that my child will see, he will identify with. He's in a school, he's part of society, he has challenges because of the boy that he is. I have to say to my son, when you get on the bus, sit downstairs, don't sit upstairs, because if something happens, they're not going to look at you like, oh, you're a good boy, you come from a good family, because black boys unfortunately have a bad reputation. So for me, it is really important that somebody like Kwesi, somebody like Preeti, they may not have the same challenges and struggles, and that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. But speak to the difficulties that we face. And then maybe I can look at you as a role model and say, maybe one day I could get there. My child could identify and say, oh, wow, he's from Ghana, I'm from Ghana, he's educated. I want to then be educated and get to that same position.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to say.
No, well, you've put it brilliantly. You really have. And I guess my naivety shines through when I say surely the fact that it's as if an obstacle has been broken down. But that's me being a bit lazy and thinking that you as a black mum will see a black man and think, well, that's good news for my black boy. But it's not, because it's lazy of me to think that, isn't it? It's a form of white privilege, I guess, to think that you must see. It's a bit like me looking at Margaret Thatcher and thinking that that's good news with my politics and thinking that that's good news for my daughter.
Yeah, I see that, but I think, James...
But I don't think that's good news for my daughter. Liz Truss, if I say, oh, look, Liz Truss is Prime Minister, daughter, number one. You could be Prime Minister one day too. Being a woman is no bar to it. So I don't want to be that kind of Prime Minister, Dad, and your boy doesn't want to be that kind of Chancellor. Thank you very much, regardless of what colour we might be.
Absolutely. And I think the important thing, James, is that even though you recognise your privilege, you're having these conversations. It's the fact that when conversations are not had, when the narrative isn't challenged, that's why then the mistakes and the things that aren't right get to be repeated.
Well, and that's why they hate diversity training, and they hate things that they call woke, or they hate any attempts that institutions or organisations might bring in to encourage these sort of conversations. And some of the politicians that we're talking about today sadly join in on that side of the argument with their anti-woke agendas, which is simply an educational experience. I am learning from Sam. I am changing my views on a couple of issues there with regard to representation in politics, because ultimately my position is a bit patronising. Here's someone who will act against my interests, but because they're the same colour as me, I'm going to tell my son to be inspired by it. Just get over yourself, O'Brien. And thank goodness for callers like Sam. 11:55 is the time, is it? Crikey. I haven't been able to work out why. I've only seen the footage of Edwina Curry, good Lord, on television this morning with a piece of tinfoil. Is she explaining that people can use it to cut down on their energy bills? Martin Lewis's face in the clip, if you haven't seen it, I'll retweet it for you to have a look at, is, I believe, what is commonly known as a picture. 11:55 is the time. Back to this question of what you, as someone who's not a white man, feel about the fact that there won't be any white man in the top tier of government this time tomorrow. Harriet's in Clapham. Harriet, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. I'm a bit nervous calling in, but it's nice to talk to you.
Thank you.
What I wanted to say was basically, to me, it kind of reminds me of, if somebody is accused of racism or something and they'll say, oh, well, I'm not racist, I've got a black friend, or, that type of thing. I see it as it is a diverse cabinet or incoming cabinet, and I see it as something that kind of easily checks the box of, well, we are a progressive party, we do care about minorities, but without having to do any of the real work actually fighting racism. We're actually recognising the institutional problems that we do have in this
They
government.
deny the existence. This is an administration that seems likely to continue the denial of the existence of institutional problems.
Well, exactly. So, for example, you have Priti Patel, who, as you said, was referencing experiencing it, but at the same time, you have a candidate, Kemi Badenoch, who was saying, well, I don't believe in it. You had that report. And I think that's the issue of racism in my experience, because I'm mixed, white and black Caribbean.
Right.
In the racism in the UK is kind of part of the danger of it, is that people aren't willing to recognise that it exists, and I think this only perpetuates that. Whereas if you compare it to somewhere like America, for example, it's so in your face that you can't really deny it. But here, I think part of the issues that make it so difficult to.
There's reasons why you would want to deny it.
Yeah,
which intrigue me. One of them would be because I've done all right in life, and I don't want anyone telling me that the system under which I've done all right is rigged or unfair, maybe.
Exactly.
And therefore having a black chancellor proves that the system isn't rigged, because look, black chancellor over there.
Exactly. And if it was rigged in your favour, you might have to. I think that people tend to jump to conclusion and think, well, that means that maybe I'm to blame for it, when you may not be. You're just existing within the system, and that's okay. But actually what you can do is recognise that, like I think your previous caller kind of mentioned, because we're not saying that this is all anybody's fault, any particular demographic's fault, but it does become a problem when people are more willing to deny the existence of something that benefits them, rather than to actually hold their hands up and say, yeah, I know I benefit from it, but it's still wrong,
I do, and I loved this hour, actually. I felt my understanding of the issue slotting into place. I think that the last caller kind of knocked this question into a cocked hat, but I'm going to ask it again anyway. Is there no sense in which, I'm going to use mere as an adjective, mere representation matters, as in we'd never had a person of colour, any ethnic minority in the cabinet before, and the first one comes in with politics that you find pretty repellent. Is that in no way better than never having had an ethnic minority in cabinet ever at all, ever at all, ever?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I think for me, what it shows me is that you can get to these positions, but if you play their game and if you have a particular view.
So we're back to your original point, was in a way it's worse. It makes things worse because it's the black friend card. It is literally saying you can get ahead in this country as a black person, you can even end up chancellor, but only if you endorse the status quo and the system that...
Yeah, and you become that black friend that they maybe potentially bring out every time.
All right, final question. The fact that there's 3 people, the 3 of the 4 highest offices of state are going to be held by ethnic minority politicians, is that surely not a little bit, Mummy? Is that just 3 black friends?
I don't know.
No, I don't know either.
Maybe I'll change my mind.
Well, let's see. Maybe they'll surprise us all. They'll sort of come out with stuff that is music to your ears. Thank you for that. It's coming up to 12 o'clock. Could continue with this. I think, given it's one of those dreadful days where we're all waiting for the news at 12:30 when the new Conservative leader will be announced, and I can only inflict so much... what's the word? Random space filling by me and Theo Usherwood upon you. I might continue with this conversation, but actually now include white men. I'm one. I've excluded you from the conversation for an hour. I mean, is it a pointless question? Does it matter to you? Have you learnt anything from the last hour of programming? Does it strike you? Did you think this morning, perhaps as a white conservative, you thought, well, this is great? As a non-racist white conservative, you thought, this is great. And now you're thinking, hang on a minute. It's not that great after all. God, 4 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. You can watch him too at 12:30, because we will be taking the announcement from the Conservative. I think the chairman's making a speech, and then the head of the 22 committee announces who has won the leadership election. I'm chuckling because of a bit I didn't play you earlier of Joe Lycett on the telly yesterday. It snorted. That for me is the mark of brilliant comedy. If you get the snort, there should be a little bell that goes off in the background. He snorted, ding, 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 ding. And they asked him, what did you think of Rishi Sunak's speech? And he said, well, he's not going to be Prime Minister, so you might as well have interviewed Peter Andre. Why? I don't feel sorry for Peter Andre sometimes when he's used as a punchline to a joke for reasons that I'm sure he doesn't understand. And I don't. Why'd you pick on Peter Andre? Why didn't you say Tommy Steele or Cliff Richard or something like that? Anyway, 12 is the time. We will be taking it live in vision as well. So get over to Global Player if you haven't got it already. Now is a wonderful opportunity to do so. You can also access all of my wonderful podcasts. And then you'll see my ugly fizzog as well. I've even put... I normally broadcast in my pyjamas. Oh, no, you know that I don't broadcast in my pyjamas because of all those viral clips. But so I can't even pretend that I've made an effort, or more effort than usual. And in fact, the shirt I'm wearing today, funnily enough, does look like a pyjama top. So it's not. It's a shirt. I can prove that by standing up because I'm not wearing the bottoms, but I won't. 5 minutes after 12 is... Well, I'm wearing trousers. I'm not wearing pyjama bottoms, for heaven's sake, matron. 5 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I continue this conversation, I think. Theo's not going to be with me, which is a shame. I thought we were going to be in glorious Technicolor. Theo will be coming down what we call the tie line. I'm glancing at my television screens. You've got the political editor of the BBC, the political editor of Sky News, presumably the political editor of ITV as well, all now filling space for half an hour. They've crossed already, and they just sort of chew the fat for 30 minutes until the event begins. It's at the Queen Elizabeth II Conference Centre, and the room is packed. It contains Theo Usherwood, among many other people, and we will cross there live when proceedings begin. Before that, staying with this, I was toying with the idea of having a little look at a story the Mirror has broken about 12 Conservative MPs. It's worth paying attention to this because I think just when Boris Johnson heads off over the horizon, there's very little hope that things are going to immediately improve. 12 Conservative MPs are ready to submit letters of no confidence in Elizabeth Truss before her bottom has even touched the bench in the House of Commons upon which the Prime Minister generally sits. And I don't know quite what to make of that. I mean, it's only 12, according to the Mirror. It's all part of a plan to bring back Boris Johnson, apparently. You have a really weird, what's the word I want? I mean, it is a bit cultish. I'm sorry, people hate that word on both extremes of British politics. But when you are defending a politician, defending a political leader, despite their myriad and obvious failings, then it does become cultish. And I mean a level of failing that is not normal. I mean, one fella delivers the worst election defeat that a party has seen since 1935, and you're still claiming it wasn't his fault. Another bloke assembles a collection of calumnies, scandals and catastrophes, any one of which would have done for a previous Prime Minister, but he clings on by his fingernails, and you're still defending him as well. So that is cultish. It becomes cultish at that point, I think. And just because Johnson is going doesn't mean that things are going to get better under Truss, not by any stretch of the imagination, but the idea that he shouldn't be going, the idea that he should be brought back, and that some members of the Parliamentary Conservative Party are already agitating to bring back Boris Johnson is simultaneously, like so much of Boris Johnson's politics, or his impact on British politics, it's simultaneously staggering and perfectly predictable. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need to tell me very simply what you would say to Conservative MPs. And on this one, I love the idea that we can actually take calls from everybody on this, whether you are a Conservative supporter, a Conservative voter or not. What would you say to Conservative MPs already planning to undermine Liz Truss, already plotting to get rid of Liz Truss? What would you say to them? From any political perspective whatsoever. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. I've kept a couple of phone lines free from the last hour, so I'm going to speak to David in Surbiton, possibly to Simba in Reading. Apologies if you were waiting to talk on that subject of representation in the Cabinet. I want to know now what you would say to Conservative MPs already plotting to get rid of Liz Truss. I don't know what I would say to them. I mean, we're in that weird upside down now, aren't we? I think Liz Truss is going to be catastrophically awful as Prime Minister. Just because I've been right about everything in British politics since June 2016 doesn't mean I'll be right about this. Every time I tell you what's going to happen next, I say I hope I'm wrong, and then it happens. And some of you still get cross with me as if it's my fault. And not just right-wing politics, left-wing politics as well. Told you what had happened in the last election. I was slightly taken by surprise by the one in 2017, I think. But it made sense afterwards. People who were desperate to stop Britain leaving the European Union sort of felt that they had one chance to cast a vote that might at least apply a little bit of pressure to the brake pedal. But not only did it not happen, but they were probably wrong to do so as well. So what would you say now to Conservative MPs already plotting to get rid of Liz Truss? And do you know, having excluded all middle-aged white men from the conversation, all white men, period, from the conversation in the last hour, it occurs to me that when I say to you, I'd be particularly interested in hearing from Conservative voters now, then I am effortlessly pirouetting from excluding all white men from the conversation to pretty much confining the conversation to white men, because that will be the vast majority of Conservative members, if not Conservative voters. So what would you say? What would I say? I always try to answer the question before I ask you to do so. I think, even though I think Liz Truss is going to be awful, and even though I think I did as good a job as anybody of chronicling Boris Johnson's utter unfitness for office from before he even achieved it, right up until the point that he left it, I think you've got to give her a chance, haven't you? You can't start plotting. If you're a Tory MP, you can't start plotting to get rid of the new boss and replace her with the old boss before the new boss has even drawn breath. You just can't do that, I don't think. David's in Surbiton. To steer us briefly back to the conversation about representation in the cabinet, what made you pick up the phone, David?
Yeah, I felt really compelled listening, certainly to the callers that called in. I thought, what wonderful points they all made, and really heartfelt. So it really kind of pulled on my heartstrings and compelled me to call in for the first time, despite feeling outraged about Brexit and your various monologues about Boris Johnson, which I could have easily called in on any of those as well.
What did you want to say?
Well, I wanted to say that I find that we speak quite often. We do this. This is true too in the business world, I believe.
Yeah.
We talk about quotas and we talk about diversity. And actually, I think we should focus way more much more on inclusivity and inclusion. And I think your previous callers talked about it, particularly in relation to her son not being represented. I thought this is a really strong point. What they're really talking about is, do the current politicians, despite the colour of their skin or their ethnicity, does it really matter in terms of representing what their worldview is or the position that they have? And I would obviously resoundingly agree with them that they absolutely don't.
What about that phrase? I should have used this phrase sooner because I got introduced to it relatively recently and I love it. You can't be what you can't see. So this is what I was naively trying to posit, was just the notion that simply seeing somebody... If ethnicity is a bar, if it prevents you getting into places, and we know that it does in this country still, even though it's no longer formalised, there's no signs in windows or anything like that, but we know that it happens. And then you see someone from the same background as you get into a place that they couldn't previously get into, even if they subscribe to policies, ideologies and ideas that you find repellent. Is there no positive to it at all? This is the bit that I sense I've got it wrong, but I'm not quite there yet. I need one last push.
Look, I think there could be an argument made to describe it as progress. It wasn't there before. First female politician would have been another good example. So absolutely could be progress, but to say it's falls short of the mark is a gross understatement. I think is what I think most callers would be, or certainly of those of ethnicity would be challenging back. So I think it also speaks to, it's quite similarly to how the Tories managed to win over so many working class voters last time, right? Is that they represented the view of working class people, and so they felt better represented. I know that's not ethnicity, but it certainly speaks to that inclusion and how you garner votes. And so I suspect that this move to have so many cabinet ministers of these ethnic groups is more a ploy to try and garner votes, but should probably...
Well, it's not going to work if my switchboard is any form of focus group. It's not going to work at all. And it's hard to imagine how it would. Because unless you've had a peculiar experience in your life, you're not going to have reached adulthood as a black woman, for example, in this country without, as Kemi Badenoch apparently claims, according to an earlier caller, without having ever experienced any racism. I mean, that is beyond lucky, as far as I can tell. So quite who it's going to appeal to from a similar background is, well, that's beyond me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. And like I say, that it's really, I think if we wanted to see that change, I think a much greater focus on inclusion. Hearing the views of your callers previously, saying, you know what, this is the kind of backgrounds I've come from. Yeah. These are the kind of struggles I've dealt with. Would go a real long way to seeing our politics progress, and therefore seeing better representation of the people in which they're elected to serve.
I want my ideas and my interests represented in cabinet,
exactly.
not my what's the word? Melatonin.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly that.
Write that one down, Keith. Thank you, David. A sparkling debut. It's been too long. I was intrigued by people who listen for ages and then finally think, do you know what? I'm going to ring in today. If I had the energy, I'd write a thesis about it. What about this idea of 12 Tory MPs already preparing to submit letters of no confidence in Liz Truss before she's done anything? I want to know what you would say to them, especially as is there such a thing as a Liz Truss supporter? I mean, apparently at the hustings, people were waving their little flags and they made their posters, and so they do exist. I mean, I'm thinking more of a Boris Johnson supporter, perhaps, who just recognise, well, no, why am I trying to tell you what I want you to say? I don't care what you say. I want to hear what you have to say. What would you say to these 12 Conservative MPs currently considering or intending, if the Mirror is right, and there's no reason why they won't be right about this, currently intending to submit letters of no confidence in Liz Truss before she's even changed the wallpaper at number 10 Downing Street? 20 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm trying to think back to... It was quite... We knew it was Johnson, didn't we? When Theresa May stepped down. That was quite an exciting hustings, actually. That was quite an exciting battle because there was quite a lot going on up until the point where they scuppered Rory Stewart by moving some of Boris Johnson's support to Jeremy Hunt. I'm trying to just think back as to why I do this for a living, right? I can't remember being less excited by the prospect of a new Prime Minister being appointed in this country. I don't know whether this is unprofessional of me. I'm going to have to start giving myself a little bit of a slap around the chops before we go live on Global Player. I can't sit here looking like a wet weekend when we're in glorious Technicolor. I'll be like this. I'll sit up, sort of go full on Hugh Edwards, sit up straight, posture. Have we got a tie? Keith, have you got a tie? Of course you haven't got a tie. I've never worn a tie since... Anyway, it is a bit of an odd stage in British politics, isn't it, where we are replacing one politician propelled into Downing Street on the back of a load of lies by another politician who knew they were lies but pretended to believe them in order to get ahead in the party, to the point where she's now being propelled into Downing Street on the back of a load of lies told by the last bloke who had to leave when the very fact that a politician whose progress is built entirely on lies is ultimately going to fall apart. So we'll catch up with Theo shortly, then we'll cross live to the QE2 Centre in Westminster for about 15 minutes in total of oratory from various luminaries, including, I think it will go, Andrew Stevenson, co-chair of the Conservative Party, Graham Brady, chairman of the 1922 Committee, and then Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister. Simba's in Reading to steer us back to the outwardly good news for anyone who cares about representation, diversity, equality. Outwardly good news that the 4 highest offices of state in this country will be occupied by people who are not white men. But it hasn't really come across as good news so far, Simba. What would you like to say?
Yeah, that's the exact topic that I'm interested in. I think, from my name, I'm probably not a white British man.
Could be a nickname, but no, I did presume I worked on that. But also, I've excluded white men from phoning in on this topic, so that was another clue.
Yeah. So I was just walking in Tesco, and I was walking with my son and thinking about how do I feel about Kwasi Kwarteng being the next Chancellor of the. I think it represents like a level of freedom. So, my son can be a left-wing selling the new communist on the high street,
yes.
Or he can be like, a crazy Thatcher boy with Thatcher tattooed on his arm,
Yes.
It represents a freedom in terms of like he can choose ideologically where he wants to be. And I think previously, or I felt as a black person that, I kind of had to be a Labour voter.
Yeah.
Now it's the party that's delivering. And at the moment, I'm not saying this government is good because it's really scary. Rishi would probably have been better, but the silver lining is that my son can see, he can be whoever he wants. He could be crazy head Boris Johnson, a dreaded up Boris Johnson, something like that.
And this, I think, is where I think you've just helped me understand a little bit better what identity politics means. Identity politics means that as a young black man, he has to follow certain political paths, and that's not fair, is it? I mean, as you say, there's a sort of an absence of freedom of thought. But are we being? I mean, where does it go? If you see the Conservative Party, I think, is fairly comfortable with racial inequality. Let me put it that way. So
I think in the UK there's always been an inequality. It's generally been on class lines. So all this is showing is that like black people can cross those class lines. I don't think it's changed the structural. I don't think the UK economy hasn't changed structurally since Tudor times. There's a class system. If you go to Eton, you can be the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
You can break some of these codes by buying some of the golden tickets.
Yeah. I can send him to where did Rishi go? It's in Hampshire.
Westminster.
If I had the money to send
Winchester.
Him to, Winchester. Yeah. He could be the next PM, Tory PM. And I think I think that's okay because it means anyone can access that system. I'm not saying the system is good. Because actually the outcomes aren't that good.
Look, our parents like mine wouldn't spend more money than they could afford to send us to these schools if they didn't actually understand that it gives us an advantage that's bought and paid for, regardless of what our background is.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it's like you work in the system that's there. It hasn't changed. Like it's still like if you went to this school and went to that school, you're gonna have an opportunity at those schools, regardless of the color.
Yeah, so I think that's true. I don't know if it was always true. At my school, we were often told that, the Nigerian lad in the next dormitory was actually a prince, and you'd sort of think, in the context of learning about racism, it was quite odd actually to have royalty, but also racism in place. That combination of privilege and background is. Well, there's no guarantees, as you say, and I like your thoughts on freedom of thought. I like that idea. I know some people may not, but I like the idea that you don't have to follow a certain path just because of the background that you have. Thank you, Simba. I think it's time to catch up with Theo Washwood, LBC's political editor, and we have to be very professional. We'll be going live on Global Player shortly. Before we do that, why are you there? Why aren't you here? I thought we were going to have some top bants.
No, I'm here for the result, James.
No,
this
I know.
is an historic moment. The first time in 3 years that we've been picking a new Conservative leader and Prime Minister. And I've just seen some very key members.
You use we very loosely there, Theo.
Well, I've just seen, James, some very key members of Liz Truss's campaign team walk into the main hall. Now, they will know the result by now. And to put it mildly, they will know the result. They've been told the result a couple of minutes ago, and they were looking very happy.
Cock-a-hoop.
So I think it's safe to assume that Liz Truss has won this contest. We're going to be hearing, of course, first from the co-chairman of the Conservative Party, Andrew Stevenson, in a couple of minutes' time. Expect him to reiterate that call for party unity. Then it will be over to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee, to read out the results. The magic number is 66.4% of the vote. Now, that's what Boris Johnson achieved last time when he beat Jeremy Hunt in the contest. Now, if they can surpass that, Liz Truss's campaign, they will. It's important because at least then they have something to go to Conservative MPs and say, well, actually, for every member of the Conservative Party who voted for Rishi Sunak, 2 members voted for Liz Truss because of her position going in to number 10 will be weakened, given that she's got to come up with a solution to the energy bills crisis, and party
Indeed.
management after dealing with the energy crisis is going to be her most pressing
That's what she has to come out of the blocks
priority.
with. I'm interrupting you partly because I always do, but also on this occasion because I'm going to announce when we're crossing live to where you are. So
Yeah.
I just want to be aware of that. We're expecting it relatively imminently, and the order of play, as you say, will go co-chairman of the Tory party, chairman of the 22, and then the new Prime Minister will say a few words. Then it's up to Balmoral, where the Queen, I gather, is working from home, which no doubt Jacob Rees-Mogg will be very cross about. And then when will we expect the Cabinet to be announced? Briefly, if you would, Theo.
Tomorrow night, we're expecting
Tomorrow
the main
night.
positions within the Cabinet to be announced.
Is it just
once
me?
Liz Truss has returned from Balmoral.
Is it just me, or is announced the new Prime Minister Day coming around earlier every year?
In 2019, it was actually in July that Boris Johnson was announced the new Prime Minister. But you're quite right to say that it is coming around with regularity. And the world's media has turned up again here to the QE2, Queen Elizabeth II Centre, to watch the spectacle of the British, the Conservative membership choosing a new PM.
And what do we know about any rumours or words on what Rishi Sunak might be doing next?
Well, there has been, of course, speculation that Rishi Sunak would actually decide to leave British politics. Those within Liz Truss's camp have suggested that he might go back and work in California, where he's worked previously. He kept up in the final weeks of the campaign, when it became clear that he was going to lose this race. He didn't suddenly tack back to try and be conciliatory towards Liz Truss. He actually kept on with his attacks. He described the economic policy as immoral, and that would point to the fact that he's not actually interested in taking up
Theo,
a job within
I'm going to
Liz
interrupt
Truss's
you there. The
cabinet.
co-chairman of the Conservative Party, Andrew Stevenson, is about to assume the position behind the podium at the QE2 Centre in Westminster, and we will shortly know who the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is going to be. And you can watch proceedings on Global Player.
Good afternoon. Today marks the culmination of the Conservative leadership election. It's been a huge honour to be co-chairman of our party, working alongside Ben Elliott. And I'm hugely proud of the way everyone has worked together to deliver this contest, which has shown the Conservative Party to be in good voice and good strength. We've held 12 regional hustings, the length and breadth of the United Kingdom, attended by 20,000 party members. It's been a long campaign. 20,000 party members and watched online by over 2.5 million members of the public. The members' hustings involved our two fantastic candidates undergoing 14 hours of questioning and taking more than 600 questions from party members. And these hustings were in addition to the multiple online hustings and the media interviews. This concluded last Wednesday with a fantastic event at the Wembley Arena, attended by 6,000 party members. I'd like to pay tribute to Darren Mott and the dedicated team at CCHQ for running the membership ballot. I'd also like to thank my parliamentary colleagues for their support throughout the process, and in particular members of the 1922 executive, ably led by Sir Graham Brady, who has been the returning officer throughout the process. But most of all, I'd like to thank our party members who've undertaken the solemn duty of choosing our next leader and our next Prime Minister. Our members have engaged constructively, positively and thoughtfully in the process, whilst also keeping busy getting our message out across the United Kingdom, something I've seen at the 87 constituency associations I've campaigned with in the last few weeks. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to say a huge thank you to our outgoing leader and Prime Minister, Boris Johnson. His leadership through Brexit, through the pandemic, and now through the war in Ukraine was never going to be easy, but time and again he rose to the challenge and delivered for our country. It is now essential that we come together as a party and unite behind our new leader and our new Prime Minister to continue Our new Prime Minister will build on the outgoing Prime Minister's legacy and continue to deliver prosperity, opportunity and security for everyone. So with no further ado, will you please warmly welcome our two fantastic candidates, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss. And ladies and gentlemen, to announce the result of our leadership election, please welcome our returning officer, Sir Graham Brady.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everybody. On the 7th of July, the Prime Minister announced his resignation as leader of our party. The 1922 committee then organised 5 ballots over an 8-day period, concluding the part of the leadership election for which we have responsibility, and putting forward the candidates to the National Convention and CCHQ for the programme of hustings all over the United Kingdom and the ballot of the membership that is now concluded. I work closely with the board of the party, CCHQ and Civica Electoral Services to ensure that all qualifying members had the opportunity to vote and to ensure that our ballot was secure as well as free and fair. I'd like to thank the 1922 executive, and in particular my fellow officers, Naz Ghani, Will Ragg, Sir Geoffrey Clifton-Brown, Bob Blackman and Gary Sambrook, and our staff for all of their help and support, especially during the administration of the parliamentary rounds of voting. I would like to thank the party board and staff for all their hard work organising the hustings, which allowed so many members to see the candidates in action, whether in person or online. I'm grateful to CES for the professionalism with which they have dealt with the ballot in distributing, collecting and counting the votes, both online and by post. Finally, I want to thank all the party members who have taken this responsibility very seriously, all the candidates who put themselves forward for election, and in particular my colleagues Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, who ran such excellent campaigns in the full glare of media scrutiny and who showed themselves to be outstanding candidates to be the leader of our party. Now the result. I, Sir Graham Brady, the returning officer for the Conservative and Unionist Party leadership election, declare that the total number of eligible voters was 172,437. The turnout in the election was 82.6%. The total number of votes rejected was 654. The total number of valid votes given to each candidate was as follows: Rishi Sunak, 60,399. Liz Truss, 81,326. Therefore, I give notice that Liz Truss is elected as the leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. Will come up on stage.
Well, thank you, Sir Graham. It's an honour to be elected as leader of the Conservative and Unionist Party. I'd like to thank the 1922 committee, the party chairman, and the Conservative Party for organising one of the longest job interviews in history. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank my family, my friends, my political colleagues, and all of those who helped on this campaign. I'm incredibly grateful for all of your support. I'd like to pay tribute to my fellow candidates, particularly Rishi Sunak. It's been a hard-fought campaign. I think we have shown the depth and breadth of talent in our Conservative Party. And I also want to thank our outgoing leader, my friend, Boris Johnson. Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle. Friends and colleagues, thank you for putting your faith in me to lead our great Conservative Party, the greatest political party on earth. I know that our beliefs resonate with the British people. Our beliefs in freedom, in the ability to control your own life, in low taxes, in personal responsibility. And I know that's why people voted for us in such numbers in 2019. And as your party leader, I intend to deliver what we promised those voters right across our great country. During this leadership campaign, I campaigned as a Conservative and I will govern as a Conservative. And my friends, we need to show that we will deliver over the next 2 years. I will deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow our economy. I will deliver on the energy crisis, dealing with people's energy bills, but also dealing with the long-term issues we have on energy supply. And I will deliver on the National Health Service. But we all will deliver for our country. And I will make sure that we use all the fantastic talents of the Conservative Party, our brilliant members of Parliament and peers, our fantastic councillors, our MSs, our MSPs, all of our councillors and activists and members right across our country. Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, and we will deliver. And we will deliver a great victory for the Conservative Party in 2024. Thank you. Thank you.
Liz Truss, the new leader of the Conservative Party, but not technically the new Prime Minister until she has visited the Queen, who is working from home at Balmoral, has just left the stage at the QE2 Conference Centre after being announced as the new leader of the Conservative Party. The political editor of LBC, Theo Usherwood, suggested that we should look out for the margin of victory. I can tell you that it is less than that enjoyed by her predecessor, Boris Johnson. I'll get you the exact figures shortly. And perhaps the most interesting bit, it's a 57.4% win for Liz Truss over Rishi Sunak, which is considerably less than Boris Johnson, but considerably more than 52.48. I don't know why I mentioned that. Seems to be a recurring figure in British politics. Shall we cross back to Theo Usherwood to read the room, Theo?
You're right to start with the result not being as good as many within Liz Truss's camp had originally hoped it would be. 57% of the total vote share going for the Foreign Secretary in her victory over Rishi Sunak, but that is nowhere near the 66.4% who voted for Boris Johnson in the contest against Jeremy Hunt 3 years ago. And the reason it's important is, as we were talking about earlier, James, Liz Truss has to be able to try and keep her parliamentary party, the Conservative backbenchers, in order. And had she actually won by a larger margin than she ended up doing, then it would have given her a bigger mandate, a mandate she really needs, going into what is going to be a very difficult period when it comes to dealing with things like the soaring cost of energy. Interestingly, we also saw her tack away from what she'd previously talked about when it came to tax cuts. The NHS barely got a mention during the 12 hustings over the last 6 weeks, but this time she said she would deliver, and she would deliver, although she didn't say exactly what she would deliver, just that she would deliver for the NHS. It was quite an unsurprising result, but as I said, we were expecting for her to do better. There, obviously, that her team is pleased with it, and now she will start putting together the mechanics for that transition into number 10, which is going to happen tomorrow. Boris Johnson and his family still have one more night in the flat in number 10 before, of course, they travel to the Prime Minister travels to Balmoral tomorrow to hand in his notice to the Queen, and then Liz Truss will follow up on and ask the Queen, Her Majesty, to form a government before returning to London at around 4 o'clock to give us a speech on the steps of Downing Street. This was Liz Truss's first speech, James, to the nation. Until now, the focus has been on the Conservative Party membership. We actually found out how many Conservative Party members there were. Around 172,000 of them got to decide the next Prime Minister.
I suppose technically 80,000 of them got to decide the next Prime Minister. 80,000 people chose the next Prime Minister. Where does the threat come from then? Talk to me a little bit more, if you would, about this notion of her mandate, the idea that, because everyone is picking up on it. You know, my mental arithmetic isn't fantastic, Theo, but I just think, looking at the numbers, I calculate it to be 57.38296% of the vote. I don't know if anyone wants to check that with a calculator. As I say, I'm no Rachel Riley. Why is that so significant? Where do these threats come from? I know that the Mirror reports today there are already 12 letters of no confidence prepared by allies of Boris Johnson who are plotting some form of return, despite the fact that it was the resignation of countless ministers from his government that prompted his departure in the first place. So why do you think it is so significant, the margin of victory?
James, what Liz Truss has to do is she has to somehow rally her party together. And she hasn't actually won a general election. And you'll remember when Boris Johnson stepped down as Prime Minister and he gave that final speech in the House of Commons, and he alluded to the fact that he thought that 80-seat majority was down in large part to his appeal to the British public in that general election back in 2019. And Liz Truss needs to avoid making the same mistake that Theresa May did back in 2016 going into 2017, when she came into number 10, actually inheriting David Cameron's majority of 15 or so MPs. She went into number 10 and there was a lot of brio, there was a lot of braggadocio amongst those working for her that she was a new authority, a new broom at the centre of government, and she had this authority. But actually, when she put that authority to the test in the 2017 election, it crumbled away to nothing, and Jeremy Corbyn, from the Tories' point of view, very nearly became Prime Minister. Now, Liz Truss is not going to call, and it's very unlikely she will call, I would say, a general election even by next year. But she hasn't actually done anything in politics yet to back up her position as Prime Minister. She's got a huge in tray of things to do, from the energy crisis to the backlog in operations and waiting lists in the NHS. And she needs to prove herself to her Conservative MPs, many of whom doubt her abilities to do the very top job, going on her past record as Foreign Secretary and International Trade Secretary, and they don't necessarily believe that she has the necessary resume, the CV, to back up her claims that she can be a good Prime Minister. Now, somehow, in the next 100 days or so, and that's what people have been talking to me about, the time limit, she has to convince them that actually she can turn the economy around, she can deal with problems like the NHS, and she can get the economy primarily back into a better situation, so that by the time that the Tories call a general election towards the end of 2024, the Conservative Party have some hope of winning it. Otherwise, if they don't have any hope of winning it, Tory MPs have shown that they'll act ruthlessly if they're doing badly in the polls, as they did with Boris Johnson, and they'll get rid of her.
Any by-elections likely on the horizon? Anybody, if Johnson is allowed to, I presume even if he is recalled after the Privileges Committee have finished their ponderings, he's still going to get his resignation honours list through. So could there be any by-elections on the horizon for Liz Truss in the short term?
There had been some suggestion that there could be a couple of high-profile departures from the Conservative Party. Michael Gove has already said that he's not going to stand down. His Surrey Heath constituency would have been a prime target for the Liberal Democrats. Dominic Raab, a keen backer of Rishi Sunak, some suggestion at one point that he might stand down. In Esher and Walton, another target for the Liberal Democrats. Now, both of those have suggested since that they plan to stay for the long term. Boris Johnson, of course, in his Uxbridge constituency, holds a majority of around 5,000 or 6,000, which would be a target for the Labour Party. But until now, he's not said, he's given nothing to indicate that actually he plans to leave politics. And in a way, that's worrying for Liz Truss, because he's a proven election winner from the Conservative point of view, having won two mayoral elections in London, having won the Brexit referendum and the 2019 election. And you remember what Ian Duncan Smith said when he was introducing Liz Truss last week.
No, I
remember
won't.
what Andrew Stevenson has just said in terms of calling for unity. Say it quietly, it's in the back of their minds that this is a man who might well try and come back. And it's easy to dismiss it as tinfoil hat conspiracies, and that's certainly proven, James, by the fact that actually there were only 600 spoilt ballot papers, where you would have assumed that Tory members had had decided that actually they'd scrawled out Liz Truss's name, scrawled out Rishi Sunak's name, and maybe put Boris Johnson's name instead. But Conservative MPs will be wanting to go into the next election with the candidate best placed to win that election, and that's why I think he'll be hanging around for now, biding his time. And if it all goes badly wrong for Liz Truss, I wouldn't count him out as a future runner in a future Tory leadership contest.
I suppose, I mean, the only person that would contemplate such a course would be a person who prioritises personal ambition and gratification above anything, whether it's the party interest, the national interest, or indeed the global interest, which is, cometh the hour, cometh the man. That's a fairly neat description of Boris Johnson, as he's demonstrated severally during his career in public life. Final question, perhaps. Well, maybe not the final question, actually. It depends whether anything else pops into my mind. Starmer will be quite pleased with this. I mean, in terms of the Labour Party's fortunes come late 2024, which she's now sort of committed to as an election, although it's not cast in stone and it's not contractually binding. Starmer would much rather Liz Truss be on the other side of the dispatch box than Rishi Sunak, I think.
Yes, I was talking to a couple of Tory MPs actually before I went in. There'll be names, I won't mention their names, but they said that they plan to shout across the floor of the House of Commons on Wednesday at Prime Minister's questions that Keir Starmer is still dull and that he's still boring, which might give you some suggestion, James.
Have they planned this? Sorry, just
be any new attack lines against
hold
the
up a minute.
leader are going to need a bit of work.
Hang on, they planned this stuff.
Yeah, that's what
they plan to shout "you're dull." So they set their mind to what's the best thing we can do in the House of Commons come Wednesday 12 o'clock, and they think, let's call him dull. Yeah. Oh, go on, tell us who it was.
Yeah, that's what they told me. They said that's what they wanted. That's
who
what
was
they
it?
To shout to Keir Starmer.
Give me some names.
Sorry, who? No, it wasn't Jacob Rees-Mogg. No.
Names. I want names.
No, I can't.
Why not? No one's listening.
I'll tell you.
Off the record, red button.
Off the record.
We should do a red button.
It was a private conversation. I can't say, but yeah. But that's what they plan to do. But Keir Starmer, this is what he's going to do. This is what I predict he's going to do on Wednesday. Is he's going to take all of those quotes from Michael Gove, from Rishi Sunak. He's going to create a long list of them, and he's going to quote them back at Liz Truss across the dispatch box. He's got so much material from this 6 weeks that he can use against Liz Truss, not just on Wednesday at PMQs, but going forward. It's been a hugely damaging contest, James, for the Conservative government, because it's just opened up all of these wounds and all of these divides within the Conservative Party. And of course, in the age of social media, in the age of 24-hour media, the Labour press office has just clocked them all up, and now they've got just a trove of material that they can return to time and time again, criticisms of Liz Truss from her own side.
Sarah Welshwood, great stuff. No doubt you'll be popping up all over the schedule on LBC throughout the afternoon as you continue to pick over the bones of this decision. Was there a mistake on the line when she said, I will deliver, I will deliver? Was that a malfunction? That was the clip I was hoping to play to you. But it may be too late now, it being 12:56. This bit was quite funny. Listen to them not knowing whether they should clap or not, because these are the people, or largely the people, that got rid of Boris Johnson. A countless, unprecedented number of ministers who actually resigned in order to prompt or preempt his departure from Downing Street. And that's largely who's in the room, or a lot of them are in the room. I love this bit. I mean, I thought everybody knew that we pronounced it Kyiv by now. Genuinely, I mean, who could? Let alone an actual foreign secretary could be the only person. Even harvesters now call it Chicken Kyiv. If a harvester restaurant has got the pronunciation of the Ukrainian capital correct, but the foreign secretary, soon to be prime minister, hasn't, we've got a problem. But it's only the second funniest thing in this clip. The funniest thing in this clip is them not realising they were supposed to clap. And I forgot the joke that I was going to do as well. I was going to come off the back and go, this is the bit when I analyse Liz Truss's acceptance speech. Pause for applause. Nobody's clapping. Thank you, Sheila. Have a listen to this.
Boris, you got Brexit done. You crushed Jeremy Corbyn. You rolled out the vaccine and you stood up to Vladimir Putin. You were admired from Kiev to Carlisle.
Why didn't she say Kidderminster? It doesn't even begin with K. Carlisle. She said, what's wrong with bloody Kidderminster? From Kidderminster to even and then she mispronounced, of course, Kyiv. And anyway, we should have a quick listen. This bit here, this was a malfunction, I'm sure of it.
Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver. And
what? That's like the record's stuck, is it? I think she might be a droid. Listen to it again.
Because, my friends, I know that we will deliver, we will deliver, we will deliver. And we...
Just couldn't hear the needle scratch. And finally, Keir Starmer's reaction to the news that Liz Truss will be the next Prime Minister. He was speaking on a visit to Frian Barnet School in North London.
Well, we've heard far more from the latest Prime Minister about cuts to corporation tax over the summer than we have about the cost of living crisis, the single most important thing that's bearing down on so many millions of households. And that shows not only that she's out of touch, but that she's not on the side of working people. So she needs to deal with the cost of living crisis, she needs to deal with the fact the NHS is on its knees, and she needs to deal with the collapse of law and order. And there can be no justification for not freezing energy prices. There's a political consensus that needs to happen. She needs to answer the question, how's she going to pay for that? Labour have been clear it needs to be a windfall tax on oil and gas companies. So she needs to show that she actually understands and can meet the challenges that are there after 12 years of failure of this Tory government.
And hopefully, I mean, I know there's a lot on her plate, but the sooner she addresses the fact that 2/3 of our cheese is imported, the better, because that is a disgrace. Here's Sheila Fogarty. 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 Here's Sheila Fogarty.
Chiều cuối thu đông lại về trên con đường vắng